Despite witnesses stating that someone else did it, and despite the fact that more murders occurred after, one man would still be wrongfully convicted for 23 years. Hello, true crimeers. This is the wrongful conviction case of Devonia Inman. Viewer discretion is advised. This particular story takes place in Adel, Georgia, which is at the time at least, a pretty small town, had a population of maybe about 5,000, 6,000 or so people. This is described as a place that Southern hospitality is still to this day is very prevalent. It's filled with like a couple of streets of just nothing but mom and pop shops. You don't get too many like big name like restaurants or stores specifically in Adel, Georgia. You do have a few though. Devonia Tyrone Inman was someone who lived in that area, and he was born on August 24th, 1978. He was born into a military family, so even though he was born in that, in Georgia, they would move around a lot before eventually moving back to that area of Georgia. Apparently, his father was pretty abusive to his mom, and so eventually his parents divorced when he was about 4 years old. His mom would then basically move back to California where they had been for some time, and his father stayed in Georgia, and eventually he would go to prison for, I'm not sure what kind of crimes, but he went to prison. The 70s and the 80s in particular were obviously pretty tough on the Black community, especially in southern states like Georgia, and in particular in a town like Adel. Now, Devonia had lived in California with his mom until he was about 15 or so. I guess he would kind of go back and forth. And in California, as a teenager at least, he had some run-ins with the law. He did spend some time in juvenile hall. He had been accused of beating up his girlfriends. He had been accused of grand theft auto, robbery. He was known to have, I guess you can say, a violent temper. But the most people, even the law, would say that his threats were pretty much typically empty threats, that his bark was much worse than his bite. Eventually, he would move back to Adel, Georgia. Apparently, the authorities there in Georgia had heard rumors that Devonia returned to Georgia because he was trying to escape a murder charge, but ultimately that really wasn't true. The reality is that Devonia's mom just basically wanted to move him back to Georgia, and perhaps a change of scenery might, change his ways. The police there kind of had him, Devonia, on their radar since he moved back. To some, it seemed that the pretty much exclusively white police force there in that area were just waiting for any reason to get him. One of the only chain restaurants or stores that this little area had was Taco Bell, because Taco Bells are everywhere. 40-year-old Donna Brown, who was a single mother to a 7-year-old child, was a night manager at the Taco Bell, the one and only Taco Bell there in Adel at the time. She was working there the night of September 19th, 1998, and she was the one closing up the store. As a matter of fact, this was only her third day on the job at this particular restaurant. Usually, and I can attest to this working in retail, typically if it's a closing shift, like the manager will want to leave with the staff from that night. And that's usually what they did at this Taco Bell. But since she was still kind of new at this particular job, she was having issues with the employees' time cards. And so what she did was she let them go early that night, and she stayed behind on her own to fix this issue she was having. I guess it was pretty custom in this area that a business person or someone working late night at a restaurant or something, it was actually pretty normal for them to call the local sheriff's department and have them escort them out of the building just for safety reasons. And so Donna told her employees she was going to do that. But eventually they would find out she never even got a chance to do that. The employees would also state that that night there was roughly a $1,700 deposit that Donna would have to deal with. The two employees who had left before Donna were Robin Carter and Larisha Chapman. Both of them were waiting for rides. Robin Carter would later state that Larisha was pacing back and forth, that she almost seemed kind of agitated while waiting for her ride, but she didn't really know why. But Robin was picked up, and then eventually, as far as anyone knows, so was Larisha. Time cards would later show that Donna Brown clocked out at exactly 1:52 a.m. At 2:04 a.m., the Adel police were called. There were some employees at a restaurant, I guess, just across the street who called police to state that it seemed like someone was lying in the parking lot on the ground at the Taco Bell across the street. So police would go and check it out. When police arrived, they found a woman lying on her back in the middle of the parking lot in a pool of blood. She was deceased, and she would be identified as 40-year-old Donna Brown. She was shot once through her right eye, and they would determine this was done by a .44 caliber revolver. They would see like abrasions and scratches on one of her hands, and to them it looked like she had probably been pushed over and maybe scraped herself on the asphalt. They found similar bruises and abrasions elsewhere, like on her legs and stuff. So they think that she was accosted first, and then possibly robbed, and then shot and killed. Police noticed that right nearby there was like these bushes, and there were bushes that were like literally like trampled down as if someone had been standing on them or sitting in them. And so what they figured was that whoever did this to her was likely lying in wait in the bushes, which to them told them that this is someone who may have been familiar with like the schedule and like the night manager routine at this Taco Bell. Like around this time, there was a Hardee's restaurant kind of nearby that was robbed by a man in a ski mask. Two employees were robbed at gunpoint. The person demanded money, but then the employee said, well, we don't take the cash out of the restaurant anymore to do the deposits. And so I guess they were able to escape. And police were called, and I guess they saw this individual, and they chased him, but the person got away and they never caught him. So they don't know if this was done by like the same person. When the homicide detectives arrived, they saw like, a group of people surrounding the crime scene now because they were looky-loos. But here's the weird thing is the detectives never questioned anyone who was there. Because a lot of the times, sometimes the killer will come back and scope it out, or there may be a witness in this crowd, they don't know, but they never even bothered to question any of them. They also never bothered to ask who made the 911 call. They never bothered to listen to the 911 call. As a matter of fact, none of the police there or the detectives took down really any notes. It's because they pretty much knew that this case would be handed over to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the GBI. And so I guess they're just like, they'll deal with it. So by 3:30 a.m., a few hours, into this, the GBI had arrived. When the GBI got there, they realized two major things. One, that the deposit was not on Donna, the $1,700 or so deposit that she was supposed to have. It wasn't on her, nor was it in the restaurant. Also, her car was missing. A 1995 Chevy Monte Carlo. As they're canvassing the area, there is a Pizza Hut, I guess, down the road, and there in that parking lot, they find one car just chilling there. It's a 1995 Monte Carlo. They determined that that car did belong to Donna Brown, so this was her stolen vehicle. They checked inside the vehicle. They did not find the money. They did not find, like, the murder weapon. They didn't find really anything except a ski mask. Her car keys were in the car, but they were like smooshed in between like the seat and the center console as if the person shoved them in there. They did pull fingerprints and palm prints from the vehicle. So I had said a few moments ago that there was a ski mask in the vehicle, but here's the craziest thing here. The ski mask wasn't even actually taken by the GBI. It wasn't collected. They didn't even realize the ski mask was in there until looking at crime scene photos later on. That ski mask was in that car for the next 2 weeks before anyone gave it to the GBI. Like, you missed something. This ski mask would later on prove to be the biggest thing about this entire case. But more on that later. So the police give the GBI their suspect. They think it's this 20-year-old kid named Devonia Inman. For what reason? Well, they don't have a reason, actually. I guess police would say that they got the name from a drug dealer. This drug dealer would say that he was talking to Inman, and Inman had a gun in his waistband, a revolver. But that was all the police really had. And like I said earlier, it sounded like they really just wanted to get this guy for something because they just felt he was trouble. On September 22nd, police would go and visit Devonia Inman's girlfriend, and she lived at a house with a woman named Marquita Thomas. The girlfriend said that Inman was with her the entire night and evening of the murder, and that he didn't leave. But then another person named Victoria Allen was apparently also at the house, and she confirmed that Devonia was there at the house most of the night. But she says that he left sometime around 11 p.m. But then followed up by saying, I don't really think he would ever kill anyone. I don't think he's capable of that. The roommate there, Marquita Thomas, told police something completely different. She said that Devonia had been talking about robbing places and stealing things and jacking people for money so that, for drugs. She claimed that he tried to get her involved in these robbery schemes to rob restaurants and other places like that. And then she said that Devonia was not at the house whatsoever that night. So then police would interview those two employees who had been there that night with Donna Brown. So initially on that night, 16-year-old Larisha Chapman told police that nothing strange happened that night, that everything seemed normal when she left. But now a couple of days later, she tells them something completely different. She says that while she was in the parking lot waiting for her boyfriend to pick her up, she heard someone in the bushes, rustling in the bushes and whispering or talking or something. And then she looked over and she said she saw someone with like a bald head wearing a white tank top. And then she said she was just too scared to say anything the night of the murder. She would basically identify this person as Devonia Inman. And then another witness came forward, this time a white woman named Virginia Tatum. She said she was just down the road from the Pizza Hut where the car was, basically found. And she said sometime, she thinks around 2 a.m., maybe a little bit before, she heard a gunshot come from the direction of the Taco Bell. Then she says she saw a vehicle just speeding down the road, and the driver was a black man wearing a gold chain. It's a very specific detail to see when someone's speeding down in a car at 2 o'clock in the morning. Then she said another vehicle with a couple more black men inside followed closely behind. And then I guess they left what would be later known as Donna Brown's car there in the parking lot of the Pizza Hut. And then the rest of them took off. So they would show this witness a photo lineup, and apparently she was super dramatic, and she went, "Oh my God, that's him," pointing to Devonia Inman. And then in January of 1999, another witness came forward, this time an inmate. His name was Kwame Spalding. He had been on charges for cocaine possession. He told police, I guess he was sharing a cell with Devonia Inman at one point. He said that Devonia Inman confessed to the Taco Bell murder and that he had done it with Marquita Thomas, the sister / roommate of his girlfriend. So the snitch basically said that Devonia and Marquita were waiting in the bushes at the Taco Bell. But then one of the witnesses said they only saw one person in the bushes. They never mentioned a second person. So then in January of 1999, just shortly after that, Devonia Inman was indicted for the murder of Donna Brown. The district attorney said, "We're going for the death penalty on this one." The trial, I guess, wouldn't start until 2001. Now, during the trial, or I guess around the trial starting, there was a man's name brought up that was told to the GBI and police that this person was the actual Taco Bell murderer, and it was a man named Hercules Brown, who was not related to Donna. You see, Hercules Brown worked at that Taco Bell before, and he knew 16-year-old Larisha Chapman, one of the people who were working there that night, one of the big witnesses. Numerous people, different people, would come forward to say that Hercules Brown was the actual murderer. He was the one who killed Donna Brown. There were even a couple of them that said that Hercules actually confessed to doing it. But none of the police and the GBI, not a single person, did anything to look into him at all. They didn't question him. They didn't interview him. They didn't do anything about it. One of these witnesses even said that, I think this was like a relative of Hercules, that said, he did this, he killed her, and Larisha Chapman was supposed to help him rob the place that night, but she backed out. And if you remember, the other girl that was working there that night said that Larisha was still there, pacing back and forth, looking really nervous. You have all of this, but they're like, we got our guy. Other people would come forward to say that Hercules would go to them asking them if they would help him rob the Taco Bell. What more do you need? So when presented with this information by the defense in court during the trial, the prosecutor says there is not one scintilla of evidence to say that Hercules Brown is our guy. We've got the right guy, and it's Devonia Inman. Now, by the time that this trial begins, guess where Hercules Brown is? He's in prison. Yeah. So you see, Hercules Brown was in prison for the double murder of a man and one of his employees at a local grocery store. The man's name was William Bennett. He was the owner. And then Rebecca Browning, who was one of his employees. It was the middle of the day. Both of them were killed during a robbery. They had both been beaten to death, severely beaten to death inside the store. And because this was done in broad daylight, Hercules Brown had been apprehended, as well as was his partner. Hercules Brown was wearing a homemade ski mask that was extremely similar to the ski mask that was found inside Donna Brown's vehicle shortly after her murder. So, he was arrested and charged, and eventually him and his partner would both be sentenced, and they're in prison for the rest of their lives. And then before the double murder, but shortly after the Taco Bell murder, another person was murdered in Adel, Georgia. His name was Shailesh Patel. Shailesh had been killed inside, I guess, one of his relatives' homes in the middle of the night, I believe. He had also been beaten to death and robbed. Shailesh owned a convenience store in that exact same hub of town. Now, unfortunately, Shailesh's murder has never actually been solved. They have never been able to pin it on anyone. There is strong belief, however, that Hercules Brown may be the likely culprit. But at any rate, Hercules Brown was told to police even before that these other three murders occurred, because he had confessed to it to many people. But again, they said, nah. And then the prosecution and the judge just really wouldn't allow Hercules Brown's name to come up in the trial of Devonia Inman. So at his trial, two of the witnesses would actually go on to recant their statements. Marquita Thomas, she admitted she lied completely about everything she said. And then Larisha Chapman also admitted she lied about everything she said. She did not see anyone in the bushes. She made it all up. But they still had the testimony of Virginia Tatum and also the jailhouse snitch. The defense would go on to show that the jailhouse snitch was basically offered something by the prosecution to testify, and he was going to be given something favorable, which is always the case, usually the case. And because the defense was not allowed to present any evidence about Hercules Brown, there was no physical evidence to actually suggest that Devonia had did this. They had no physical evidence, nothing. And all they had was now those two witness statements. And I guess that was enough for the jury. They found Devonia Inman guilty, and he would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would sit and languish in a jail cell for a very long time. He tried to appeal in 2006. He was denied. In 2010, Georgia's Innocence Project got a hold of Devonia's case, and they found the biggest piece of evidence in this entire case: the ski mask that was left inside Donna Brown's car. The ski mask that no one seemed to care about collecting for 2 weeks. Well, they are the first people in 2010 to even attempt to test that ski mask. So they swabbed the entire inside of that mask, and they found DNA, enough DNA to make a whole profile for a person. And that DNA was 100% guaranteed not a match to Devonia Inman. It did match one person, though. That person was Hercules Brown. The ski mask that was found inside the stolen vehicle of the murder victim had the DNA of the person that everyone was telling police and the GBI actually committed this murder. The ones, the police and the GBI, the prosecution, that everyone said, no, we got our guy. So by 2014, this process goes very slowly, unfortunately. They file a motion to get a new trial based on this DNA evidence. They're denied a new trial. They say, no. They literally tell him, you're not getting a new trial. Despite the DNA evidence, the only physical evidence we have showing who did this, that it points to an actual already convicted murderer. No, you're going to stay in prison. Sorry. It wouldn't be until 2018 when this story kind of blew up in the media a little bit. And I kind of feel like they had some pressure put on them finally. And because of that, Devonia Inman's legal team was a massive group of very, very good lawyers, very well-known lawyers, people who did not mess around. This team of lawyers, they would basically discover that the jailhouse snitch, who was a big key piece of the evidence, or witness evidence at the trial, he had later recanted his entire statement. And no one ever told anyone. He completely said all of it was made up. He just wanted some kind of deal from prosecution, so he made the whole thing up. Shocker. Never happens. Then they uncover that the other witness, the last remaining witness who hadn't recanted yet, guess what? She admitted she lied too. She said she completely made up the entire story about seeing the cars and the black man behind the wheel. She said there was a reward for any information that can lead to something. And so that's what inspired her to lie. Now, in 2021, he is still in prison, but his new legal team is working their butts off on this thing. So now their 4 witnesses have all recanted and all admitted they lied. The DNA evidence points to only one person, Hercules Brown. The defense team presented to the Supreme Court, or the Court of Appeals, that the prosecution, they failed to disclose the arrest records of Hercules Brown to the defense. But then they also discovered that Devonia Inman's original defense lawyers, they were made aware of all of these arrest records and all of that and stuff like that, but they just decided not to do anything with it because initially they weren't allowed to talk about Hercules Brown anyway. So in November of 2021, the Court of Appeals, or the Supreme Court, I'm not 100% sure on this, but one of them vacated the conviction of Devonia Inman. This is because of all of the misdoings of the prosecution, because that they also said that it was completely unfair of the prosecution and the judge to not allow the Hercules Brown information into the trial to confront another possible, suspect in this. And now we have the DNA evidence as well, plus all the witnesses who had recanted. And so in December of 2021, they decided to then just dismiss all charges against Devonia Inman. They decided not to go forward with a second trial. And after 23 years of being in jail, waiting for the trial, and going, and staying in prison, Devonia Inman was finally released back into the world. He was now a free man. As of the time of me making this video, I don't believe Hercules Brown has been officially charged with the murder of Donna Brown, but he is already serving life without parole for the other double homicide. So he's never getting out of prison again. But in a way, I do hope that they do something to make sure Donna Brown gets the justice she deserves. Because I think in all of this, she kind of got lost. I don't really know much about her, unfortunately. There really isn't much information about Donna Brown or the other victims in this case, sadly. But she deserves the justice still. She was repeatedly victimized, basically. Not only was she murdered, but her and her family were just dragged through all of this with lies. And it's just so unfortunate, and it's so sad that she hasn't gotten her justice yet. Neither has her family. And one man paid the price for having a rough life, and also paid the price for being a black man in a town that really wasn't so welcoming to people like that, unfortunately. But at least he's out now, and his life is an uphill struggle because he has to reacquaint himself to the world as it is now. I mean, he was basically released in the middle of COVID happening, so we were already in like a crazy place. So that had to be like a really bizarre time to be free, but I don't think he cared. But a lot of injustice in this one, and it's just really sad. But that is it for this case, True Crimeroonies. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you have tripped, fallen, and stumbled your way into this video, hello, I'm Mike. I tell true crime stories here and over on TikTok. So please subscribe to me here, follow me over on TikTok. The link is in the link tree in the description of this video below if you want to follow me there. And if there's a case you want me to cover, please email me. It's also listed below. Just email me the name of the person, where it happened, when it happened, and I will add it to my list eventually, I promise. Next, if you want to support me in any way, we do sell merch like this t-shirt here and many others. It's also in the link tree in the description below. We do ship all over the world. And then lastly, if you have a Discord account and you want to join my Discord server, please feel free to do so, but be over the age of 18 or else you will be kicked out. It is also linked below in the link tree. But that is it for this video, True Crimeroony Doody Ding Dong. So I will see you for the next video. Always a weird thing with me. Goodbye. It's stupid. That was dumb. I understand if you unsubscribe. Don't unsubscribe. Please.